Well, today is going to be a little bit different. I decided that since I'm actually right now in the middle of making a workbench, and I'm making that workbench out of what I think of as scrap material, but I've seen a few comments about scrap material in other people's channels and in my own, like where'd you get it, that sort of stuff. I thought I'd go through where you can get scrap materials if you don't have a bunch of stuff that you want to buy, right? So if you're not buying out there like no new stuff and you got offcuts and all that, you're not going to have scrap material just laying around unless you know some tricks. So this is going to be the top 5, maybe 4, let's call it the top 5 places that you can get free material for making projects in your workshop or wherever it may be. Now, I am not going to state up front that this free material is going to be easy material, and anybody who has a working workshop for woodworking is going to know that free usually means junk. But if all you need is stuff to make little projects for your workshop, or like you've seen me doing like scrap wood for my French cleats and stuff like that, if you want to know how to get that kind of scrap, like lumber kind of scrap, then I've got some tips for you. So let's start with what I've got in my hand here, sheet goods. Can you get free sheet goods? Yes, actually. There's a couple different options for it. This one is a good example. This is a little bit bigger than a 1/4 inch plywood. I'm guessing pine. All I can smell is glue. Probably pine. It is relatively strong structurally, but if you tried to mill this in any way, cutting it down, you'd find a lot of voids in it. What is this material? This is dunnage material, spelled D-U-N-N-A-G-E, dunnage. And this comes from your local lumber yard, big box store, whatever it may be. This particular material is used to act as a strap, I guess, guard, for lack of a better term, usually under a package. What is this? This comes from the bottom of the packages that Lowe's gets for lawn equipment, for lawn furniture, right? And I think very specifically, this one came from a long package, so a very long package that was used for patio umbrellas. All right, so what do they have this for? Well, usually this goes under a cardboard box, and then there's a band that is looped underneath of it and strapped up and over the cardboard box to hold in place, and that allows them to stack it more effectively so it's not crushing the various boxes. Now, you may also find sheet goods like this, though sometimes a little lower quality, if you can imagine that, in the tile section, where they'll do the same kind of thing. They'll have stuff like this kind of used as a way to distribute weight between different boxes so that the boxes don't crush the one below. So that's potential, but that's usually not what people think of when they think of sheet goods. So let's get to the next one. Here is a piece of 3/4 inch heavy duty plywood, like cabinet grade plywood. And I got it for free. Well, technically my wife got it for free. How? By getting a free cabinet off of Craigslist. That's how. If you really want like good cabinet grade hardwood, essentially, because this is maple ply from what I can tell, and you need it in cabinet sizes, look for other cabinets that already exist. Now, in this case, this one came in, I don't even know the measurements on this one. It's like 18 inches roughly, and it's got a tongue and groove like face piece put on. I mean, obviously, you're not going to be able to use it for every single thing you want, but there's an option if you need to get little pieces. I've got a few of these that are like 5 foot long because they were the sideboards of the cabinet, and it was just a plywood cabinet someone had in their either basement or garage. You're not going to be able to use it for your kitchen. These are not food safe, but there's an option. Other sheet goods. All right, so this one comes from the offcuts at a construction. So you may not be able to do this if you're in industrial construction, but you may find this in residential construction where they'll have a big trash bin set to the side and they're just chucking stuff in there. If you're willing to ask the guy who is basically the foreman of that location if you can dumpster dive or pick out some of their scraps, you may be able to find some offcuts. They're not going to be huge sheets. They're not going to be 4x8s. You may be lucky if you get anything bigger than 3 feet. Oftentimes you're going to find some triangles and stuff like that. But theoretically, if that's all you need a piece like this to make boxes, or like I was doing the French cleats, little, containers and whatnot. Sheet goods are still viable. You can pick them up at places like that if you're willing to ask. A lot of what I'm talking about for where to go to get stuff, by the way, requires one of two things: either lots of time or really good talking skills. Really, basically, is your charisma high enough to go up and be a nice enough person to the individual for a short enough period of time or a long enough period of time, depending on what you're doing, to get them to agree to give you something for free? That's charisma, right? So that's a terrible way of thinking about it, but that's the truth of the matter. So those are things. Now, what about if you need lumber? Like, what if you need 2x material? That's a little bit harder to come by sometimes, but you've got a couple different options. So number one, obviously, like the other one, you can go to the construction offcuts. You're going to find construction offcuts usually do not exceed more than 3 or 4 feet. They're going to be 2x6s, 2x8s, different things. You're going to find more often than not, they're just cuts from where they do like the bird mouth or something like that on their rafters. I use those for kindling for my stove. These are 2x6 materials, oftentimes worth looking and seeing if you can find them, but don't count on them being there. If you need longer materials, where do you get that? Well, I don't have any 2x to examine here, but we're going to go through stuff like this. This is 1x. This is trim wood, trim boards. If you are in a town that has older buildings, older houses that are being renovated, you may be able to find stuff like this in their trash. Again, ask first. You don't want to be digging through a trash bin and have somebody come out and shoot you, especially if you live in the US, right? But this kind of stuff you can usually get, and ask your neighbors if they're doing a renovation to their house, if you can go over there and get it. Requires having some humility to say, hey, I want to get some free scrap wood from, you for projects. And if they're like, what kind of project? Be like, you can be honest and say, I don't know yet, but it seems nice to use it rather than to throw it away. I'm all about use it rather than throwing it away, and really should get down to the point where the only things left that you need to throw away are absolutely unusable. There's plenty of other upcycling channels here on YouTube that will show you exactly what that looks like. So what else can you get out of stuff like that? Well, you might get lucky, find yourself with some rough cut or rough sawn boards. Depends on how old the buildings are in your area. Now, this one happened to come out of my own barn, but this is a rough sawn dimensional 1x8. So they are exactly 1 inches by 8 inches. And the reason I'm not using this where it was before is because it's heavily cupped. You're going to find twists and cups in all sorts of crazy places. You can get wood like this if you want it, if you know how to use it. But anyhow, there's that. Old barn wood. Now, I've got some opinions on old barn wood. If you are in a city and someone is selling you old barn wood and you don't have a mode of transportation to take yourself out of said city, you're probably going to pay for it. Frankly speaking, you're probably going to pay for it. I lived in New York City and Harlem for a while, and I cannot tell you how absurd it is to see a piece of wood like what I just showed you there going for sale in like the artisanal shop or, whatever it may be, for literally hundreds of dollars sometimes. It's all sorts of crazy, but just know there are people out there that are buying things that in the countryside are getting that same exact thing for free. Sometimes it's trash. Sometimes it's being thrown away, and they'll be selling it in New York. It's crazy town. But here's the deal. If you are in a city like that, right? You're not in the country. We're kind of in the country here, right? So we can get barn wood. I can hop on Craigslist and find someone selling beams of barn wood that would be like, 10-foot span. By the way, this is only an 18-foot span. This is a 10-foot span or something even bigger than that with an 8x8 old barnwood beams and all this stuff for like $20-$30. Of course, it depends on, what time of year it is and whether they came from a big city and know the difference or whether they just want it out of their yard, right? So there's all sorts of stuff. That's a thing. You can get big beams that way. But if you're in a city or you're in an apartment and you're thinking, hey, I'm going to make this really cool piece of furniture like I saw a guy on YouTube do, and he said he used a barn beam and, all this stuff, and you can get that kind of stuff. You get what you pay for when you're out there. You're going to end up paying for it, frankly. So How do you get free stuff? What if you're in the city, where do you go? Well, I'm going to go back to something that I mentioned earlier. That sheet good that I was talking about, what they call dunnage, right? Dunnage comes in different formats. Comes in sheet goods like this. Comes in big flat 3x4 sheets, which are usually really low quality. Let me see if I've got another piece here. I should. Oh yeah, it's way over here. I got a lot of this stuff. All right. Dunnage also looks like this. All right. Now this is not sheet goods, and I wouldn't consider this like good quality lumber either, but it is usable if all you needed to do was to make a table or something like that that didn't need to be pretty. And if you know how to process wood, you might even be able to make slab surface, like, you know, doing glue ups and whatnot with it. Most dunnage, however, comes as pressure treated lumber, most of it. It might be cedar on occasion, but most of it is pressure treated because of what it's used for. So what is dunnage? And more specifically, what is this dunnage with the strip right down the middle? Okay. So during the pandemic, I worked at Lowe's just because the company that I was working for at the time had put our hold on our travel. That was the work I used to be doing. So when you're working at Lowe's, you'll learn about dunnage real quick, especially if you work in the lumber area or in fulfillment. What dunnage is the space that the forks on a forklift need to get under a prepackaged shipment, okay? So the dunnage itself provides that space for the forklift, and the strip on the bottom, this groove, this rabbet as it were, that groove is there to put a strap through. The plastic straps will fit right in there, and that strap will hold this piece of wood to whatever you've packaged, straps in nice and hard, and that way the forklift can lift up the package and take this and set it somewhere, whether it's on a truck for delivery or on top of other packages, and they'll always have room for their fork to fit in because of the dunnage. So it's mostly all at least 1.5 inches in thickness, and mostly all at least 2 inches in span, right? And then it'll come in different lengths and whatnot. None of them are going to be 48 inches, just so you know, because that wouldn't make sense for the width of stacking 2 side by side on a truck. So usually going to come in less than like 3 feet or around 3 feet. Pretty good stuff, though. I have used this for making fence posts for the garden. I've used it for making working surfaces out there. I actually did some glue ups with it, make counter space and stuff. But this is mostly used, from my perspective anyways, for outside, and can be useful there. Processing. Dunnage is a process heavy job. This is a good piece, frankly. This one's really nice and pretty flat. There's not a lot of twist to it. Most dunnage is going to have a lot of twist. So you kind of need to know what you're getting into. Can you use it? Sure. Is it a replacement for traditional 2x4 lumber? No, it's not. So don't go using it to build a house. Please, please, please. Do not use this anywhere that you need food safe. Don't use this in a contained or enclosed environment, because most of it has been and will continue to be exposed to mold. And if you don't bleach dry this or bleach treat it, you're going to get mold again. The spores are there. Again, material like this has its place, but it's mostly for outside projects. But you can get it, and you can get this whether you're in a city or not. And again, if you've got a process that you want to deal with where you want to, bleach it, or you want to stick it in a bleach bath or whatever, you can do that with this, and you can probably make something good out of it. What else do I have that you can get for free that I have gotten for free? Okay, well, one thing that you can't get for free, but it's really cheap, and I think it's worth mentioning, is cull lumber, C-U-L-L, cull lumber. Now, this is going to be different depending on where you are. And if you live in cities like I said, New York or whatnot, I mean, it's going to be possible that they put cull lumber up, but it's very likely they know somebody in the area that'll buy it by the, like the package. And so they probably won't just put it out at a super cheap price for people in the public to see. Now, when I was working at Lowe's during the pandemic, I learned about cull lumber. It was something I was unaware of because it's not what I did before. Cull lumber is the lumber that has deteriorated in some way, shape, or form to the point where it is not going to sell for its original price. Now, the stores that sell lumber, or more specifically, the big box stores, have a lot of margin on what they are selling. And I don't want to speak in a general sense here, but I know that our store that we were selling, especially during the pandemic, our store that we were working at, they could sell for like 80% off and still be making a profit. And so occasionally things would go on sale or go into cull packs where they take a whole bunch of the same kind of materials, or potentially they'll take a whole bunch of the same, like all these PT boards are going to go into the cull pack because they're deteriorated in some way, shape, or form. We're going to package them all up and we're going to sell them for 60% off to the general public. Sounds like a good deal, right? But if you're working there, then you can sometimes cut deals. Depends on how nice a person you are. And I tried to be a really nice person because this was important to me. So I had a guy who worked in the lumber yard, and he called me up one time on our internal Zebra things, and he was like, "Hey, John, I need you to come take a look at something." I'm like, "All right, weird, but cool. Not my normal thing." But I came rolling over. I go, "What's going on?" He goes, "All right, so we've got all these 4x4 posts. They're cedar 4x4 posts. At the time, they were selling for like 10 or 12 bucks a post. I have no idea what they are now." He goes, "We are cull packing these posts, or we will be. It takes me," and I forget, it was like an hour to do the whole processing, to pick through the entire stack, roll the whole thing, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to process these all out. It has come to my attention that the amount of time I take to process these cuts into the profit margin for the cull pack. So they end up having to price the cull pack at like, say, 50 or 60% off rather than 70 or 80% off because they're not making any money off of it. He goes, "I kind of don't want to deal with it. So I know that you have bought cull lumber from us before." I did. I found out about it and tried to buy it whenever I could, whenever it made sense, especially since I wasn't making much money there. He goes, "Well, we're going to cull these out. I will sell them to you for $1 a board." Couldn't pass it up. That was literally like 90% off at the time, more than 90% off now that I think about it. And so I bought 20 of them because that's all they were culling out. But what does that actually look like? Well, this is an offcut. I actually cut these down already to make legs for my workbench that I'll be showing a video of in a few days. Maybe a week, depends on how long it takes to make it. But they are split. They're split lengthwise all the way down, all the way to the pith. So if you look at it end to end here, you can see it's cupped quite a bit. Some of them are pretty twisted. And like I said, all of them were split end to end all the way down. And any of the ones that were split like this, he sold to me for $1 a pack now, or $1 a piece. Now, some of them are split on both sides. I fully anticipate that if I'm going to use that, I'm going to have to do some processing on it. But ones like this, the strength in this lumber isn't in that split. The strength in this lumber is in the verticality of it, so the pressure that you're putting down on it. So that split doesn't really affect what I want to use it for. Could I plane the surface flat and fill that split with, acrylic? Yeah, sure, but that's cost. Like, why would you do that when you're just going to use it for, a workshop table? So in this instance, I got 20 of them and I stuck them in my loft. At the time, I had no idea what I was going to use them for, but it was too good a deal to pass up. If you are in an apartment and you work at a Lowe's, you can still do that kind of thing. When I lived in Harlem, I went down to the Home Depot on the A train and bought cull lumber. I didn't know that's what it was at the time, but I bought the cheap discount lumber in the back corner, packaged it up with some ropes, literally like tied it to my, I didn't tie it to my back, I held it in place, and walked with 8-foot lumber in, I think I had like 6 or 7 boards, 8 foot long, into the subway, tucked them under the seat, rode all the way up to Harlem and brought them into my apartment so that I could make a loft in my apartment for cheap. Do you want to do that? Do you want to be the social pariah that brought lumber into the subway? Probably not, but I did. Why? Because I was a cheap person. I didn't have a lot of money. Can't afford things like that. So that was what, you make those decisions. Cull lumber. That's a big one. All right. But it's not going to be free. And if you are not working at the store, they're probably not going to sell it to you for super cheap either, even though it should be. By the way, what do they do with that cull lumber if nobody buys it? You want to take a wild guess? If you said they shred it or they crush it and they throw it away and it goes to your local landfill, you would be correct. Basically, if no one buys it, nobody gets it. Let's go through the list. Let's see if I got all 5. Cull lumber might not be free, but it's going to be really close to free. But you're going to need to work at the shop that has lumber, or have a friend who works at the shop that has lumber. So I'm going to put that as number 5, lowest on the totem pole. Best materials you could possibly get in this list, probably as far as like newest materials, but worst materials because they're going to take the longest to process, whether that's, steaming them to get the cups out or whatever you have to do there. Okay, so that's number 5. Okay, number 4, cull lumber. No, I said number 5 is cull lumber. Number 4 is dunnage. All right, dunnage in its various forms can be very useful. Not a pretty thing, but better than grabbing pallets, which I'm going to count pallets as dunnage because they are in the same category. They're literally waste materials meant to make it easier for a forklift to lift packages. So dunnage and pallets, same exact category, right? Number 3, this is going to be tear outs. Tear outs are going to come in unexpected locations, people pulling apart their old decks. Some of them are good quality materials, but oftentimes rotted at one end or the other. So you're going to have to, process them a lot. So tear outs are going to be one of those things. Number 2, so we're going up the list to number 1, I guess. Number 2, that is going to be number 2 is going to be work sites. Going and talking to the guy at the work site and saying, hey, you've got the sheet goods you're throwing away, et cetera, et cetera. Can I have those? Number 2. Okay. And number 1, I didn't put it on the list, but I really should have. I did actually put it on the list. Number 1 is going to be local, they used to call them classifieds, but local like pickups of, say, Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace freebies. And guys, this one's random. But my goodness, there are times when, say, some guy's like, I've had this thing in my basement for 5 years. Heck, I've done this a million times, by the way. I've had this in my garage for a million years. I cannot possibly spend the time that I need to in order to make it work for what I need it to be, and I need to get rid of it. So when you see those piles of lumber for free on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, some of those are worth looking at, even if the picture makes it look terrible. Sometimes those are the best ones to look at because they're not gone in an instant. But number 1, free place to get good lumber stuff is going to be those classifieds. Okay, so those are my top 5 places to get stuff. Now, here's my final notes on this, and I know this video has gone a little bit long. I'll try to cut it, make it a little bit better, but this is a time or money question. When you are doing projects and you want free materials to do those projects, you are going to be spending your time to accumulate those free materials, right? Not only to accumulate the materials, but also to do the project itself. You have to consider that time as part of the value, right? So if you need your value and you can't afford that material, then that is of value to you. The time is worthwhile. But if you are working in a scenario in which the money that you are income-wise getting from the hours that you spend at work accounts for that time that you would otherwise have spent accumulating and storing and processing and producing, then it might actually be more valuable for you to buy it brand new, ready to rock, or buy it from someone else who, like me, is making it. Now, I know that sounds crazy to those of us who are getting the free stuff now, and maybe that's who my audience is. I don't really know. But we need both sides of that, right? We need the people who are buying brand new stuff because they can afford it. We also need the people who use the old stuff because they can't afford new, but they know how to use it, right? In both instances, although one has a tendency to lean towards throw it away when it's not useful, I want to put a kind of a challenge out there. If you're someone who thinks, hey, you know what, why would why did YouTube give me this video talking about where to get free stuff from? Everything he's just talked about is ugly. Everything he's just talked about is gross. Everything he's just talked about requires so much effort to do when really just want the thing I can buy from IKEA or whatever. I want to put a challenge out to you. When it comes time to get rid of the thing that you bought, whether that's the trim for your house or the cabinets that you bought or any of that stuff, if you try Facebook Marketplace or if you try Craigslist and you're not getting any hits and it's just not worth your time anymore to deal with the scheduling and all that stuff, put it up for free, stick it on the side of your road, whatever it may be. Don't just take it to the dump and throw it away, because there are people in your area, there are people outside of your area looking at your area that would gladly take that off your hands, and they're probably going to get a lot more use out of that thing, even if it's not in pristine condition. For those of us who are on the receiving end, don't be bad people. Don't go up and just pick and choose and whatnot. If you want, help that person out, make them want to do it again. Take everything. If you don't need what you've taken, you put it out on your street. Pass it down the line. Make it as easy as possible and as pain-free as possible for the person who wants instant gratification and can afford it to want to do that sort of exchange again. It helps everybody out in the long run. And it keeps junk out of the landfill that doesn't need to be in the landfill yet. That's my note on that one. By the way, if you guys this is a zero, not a zero, is that higher than one? I don't know. Bonus tip. If you are trying to find free things, and this one's kind of I want to say controversial. It's not really controversial. This should be obvious. Go and find someone who works in a service industry. I mean, we all know who they are. I was one of them. If you see your neighbor and you're like, man, they're just really hustling. They got a lot going on, but it's not like fancy hustling. It's not like, they're driving nice cars or whatever, but they're hustling like they're beaters. They've got a wood splitter out back and they're doing all that kind of stuff. That's the kind of neighbor that you need to reach out to and ask, hey man, I'm looking for this kind of thing. I know it's kind of awkward, but go and find that person, even if they have nothing in common with you at all, even if you're politically divided, it doesn't matter. Go and make friends with your neighbors and find out, hey, do you have the hookup for whatever this may be? And share. Again, kind of goes back to be a nice person, right? Supposed to love your neighbor as yourself. I was always taught. And who is your neighbor? Everybody's your neighbor. This world is small. I mean, anybody watching this video, technically my neighbor. Hi guys. Hi neighbors. This is so stupid. I'm done. All right, I'm going to cut this together. Hopefully it'll be a little bit shorter than what I just talked out. I think this came in at about 30 minutes. I hope you guys got some value out of where to find free stuff. And yeah, go make friends with the people who work at Lowe's. They're good people. Go make friends with the people who work at Home Depot. They're usually good people too.